The first thing Sorelia Voss saw when she woke was not the ceiling, not the warning lights, not the frost crawling across the glass, but a human man breathing beside her like he belonged there. For 3 silent seconds, the universe refused to explain itself. Red alarms blinked across the medical bay of Aster 9, washing the white walls in pulses of emergency light. Steam rolled from broken vents. Somewhere above her, a pressure valve clicked again and again, patient as a clock counting down. Sorelia lay beneath a thin thermal sheet, her blue-green skin glowing faintly in the cold, her silver hair spread across the recovery pad like spilled moonlight. Her shoulder ached. Her throat tasted of ozone and sterile gel. The last thing she remembered was the diplomatic shuttle shaking apart in a storm of ion fire. Then the station AI calling her name in a voice that sounded almost afraid. Now she was awake, alive, and not alone. The man beside her was broad-shouldered, pale-skinned, and wrapped only from the waist down in a torn medical blanket that had clearly been thrown over him by the automated system. His chest rose and fell with slow, exhausted breaths. Damp blonde hair clung to his forehead. A faint cut marked one cheek, already sealed with silver med foam. He looked less like an invader than a crash survivor who had lost an argument with every machine in the room. Sorelia did not care. Among the Valari, no one entered a royal recovery chamber without oath, bloodline, or execution order. No one lay beside a noble envoy. No one crossed the distance between bodies unless the law itself had opened the door. Her hand moved to the defense band on her wrist. It sparked weakly, then died. Of course, the storm had eaten the power grid. She pushed herself upright, ignoring the spin in her vision, and stared at him as if anger alone could force the truth out of his sleeping face. The scanner above them flickered. Lines of Valari text trembled across the cracked display. Patient 1, Sorelia Voss, stabilized. Patient 2, Ethan Cole, Terran origin, stabilized. Cross-species thermal recovery complete. Sorelia went still. Thermal recovery. The machine had put him here. Not desire. Not insult. Not conquest. A medical protocol. A desperate one. The human stirred. His eyes opened slowly, gray and unfocused at first, then sharp with confusion as they found her face. He blinked once at her luminous skin, once at the broken ceiling, and once at the blanket covering him. Then he said, in a rough American accent, "I'm guessing this is not Denver." Sorelia did not smile. Her voice came out low and cold. "Explain why you are in my bed, human." He looked down at the recovery pad, then back at her, and swallowed. "I was really hoping you knew." Before she could answer, the station doors sealed with a heavy magnetic thump. A new warning burned across the wall in red letters. Royal bond imprint detected. External access approaching. Sorelia's blood went cold. Ethan read the screen, then her face. Outside the door, armored footsteps stopped in perfect formation. Someone had not only placed the human beside her. Someone wanted them found. The footsteps outside the sealed medical bay did not move like rescuers. They moved like witnesses arriving early to a trial. Sorelia kept her eyes on Ethan Cole, because looking at the door would have meant admitting fear, and fear was something Valari nobles were trained to bury before childhood. Ethan sat very still with the thermal blanket pulled tight around his waist and one hand raised where she could see it. He was not smiling now. The red warning light cut across his pale face, turning the dried med foam on his cheek the color of rust. "Tell your people to slow down," he said carefully. "I woke up 30 seconds ago." "They are not my people right now," Sorelia whispered. That was when the station intelligence spoke again, its voice broken by static. "Emergency record available. Playback begins." A cone of blue light opened above the recovery pad, the air filled with a flickering image of the bay 6 hours earlier. Sorelia saw herself carried in by the automated medical arms, unconscious, her breathing shallow, her royal cloak stiff with ice. Then the outer hatch blew open under pressure from the storm tunnel, and another body slid across the floor in a cloud of white vapor. Ethan, his flight suit, was smoking from chemical frost. His helmet was cracked. One gloved hand dragged uselessly against the tile as the station arms caught him before he struck the wall. The image skipped. The intelligence continued. Patient 2 exposed to acid spores. Clothing contaminated beyond recovery. Decontamination required. Ethan stared at the image of himself with the expression of a man watching a stranger survive something he could not remember. That explains the blanket, he muttered. Sorelia did not answer. Her attention was fixed on the next line forming across the display. Primary heaters destroyed. Secondary heaters offline. Patient 1 temperature falling. Patient 2 metabolic output compatible with emergency thermal stabilization. The hologram showed the medical arms hesitating between two dying systems. One was a cracked heating column sparking blue at the base. The other was Ethan Cole, barely breathing but alive, his human body producing heat with stubborn, primitive consistency. The machine had chosen him the way a drowning hand chooses a rope. Not because he was honored. Not because he was invited. Because he was warm enough to keep her alive. Sorelia felt something inside her loosen, and she hated it. The door shook once as someone outside engaged an override key. Ethan heard it too. His eyes moved from the door to the warning on the wall. Royal bond imprint detected. What does that mean? He asked. Sorelia looked at the thin silver band around her wrist. Beneath the damaged metal, a faint line of light had appeared, pulsing in time with his heartbeat on the monitor. It means the chamber recorded shared survival as shared consent, she said. That sounds like a design flaw. It is royal law. That sounds worse. Another thump rolled through the door. A voice outside called her name with perfect ceremony and no warmth. Sorelia Voss, remain where you are. Ethan reached for the emergency robe hanging beside the bed. For himself, she thought. Any sane man would. Instead, he tossed it to her without looking too long, then turned his back toward the door. Put that on, he said. They are here for a scandal. Do not give them one. Sorelia held the robe against her chest and stared at the human who had every reason to save himself first. For the second time since waking, she had no words. The machine had chosen him to keep her alive. But this choice was his. The robe had barely settled over Sorelia's shoulders when the air changed. It was not a sound. It was not a light. It was something older, a silent pressure released from beneath her skin, carried through the broken medical bay by the failing vents. Ethan felt it before he understood it, a sharp sweetness in the back of his throat, like winter flowers crushed under electric rain. He turned halfway, saw Sorelia gripping the side of the recovery pad, and stopped. Her silver eyes had narrowed with shame, not anger. Do not come closer, she said. Ethan lifted both hands. Was not planning to. My body is reacting to threat. That makes two of us. The door trembled again. Outside, the Valari override tone climbed higher, one clean note at a time. The defense band on Sorelia's wrist sparked, dead metal trying to remember its purpose. Ethan saw the faint shimmer around her skin, blue-green light pulsing beneath the robe like heat lightning behind clouds. His eyes watered. His lungs tightened. Then he sneezed so hard the monitor beside him chirped in alarm. Sorelia stared at him. You sneezed. Ethan wiped his nose with the back of his hand, embarrassed and confused. Your royal defense system smells like expensive laundry detergent and a thunderstorm. That is impossible. I am having a really strange morning, so you will need to be more specific. Her voice dropped. Valari threat pheromones impair decision-making in most warm-blooded species within 15 feet. They create obedience, hesitation, sometimes collapse. Humans are listed as high-risk responders. Ethan glanced at the door, then at the scanner, still blinking his name beside hers. Well, I am not feeling obedient. I am feeling cold, annoyed, and pretty sure somebody is setting us both up. Sorelia watched him closely, searching for the signs she had been taught to expect. Dilated eyes, slowed speech, unsteady posture, a mind bending under chemistry. But Ethan Cole did not bend. He stood barefoot, on freezing tile, wrapped in a medical blanket, facing a sealed door full of armed nobles, and his greatest concern appeared to be keeping her out of their cameras. The fact unsettled her more than the pheromones unsettled him. Her instructors had called humans impulsive. Her reports called them unstable. Her counsel called them useful only when watched. Yet this one had been given every excuse to panic, accuse, or run. Instead, he pointed at the ceiling camera with 2 fingers. That thing recording? Sorelia followed his gaze. A small black lens glowed red above the surgical arm. Yes. Then we need the full emergency log before your friends get in here and edit the story for us. The simplicity of it struck her like a clean breath. Not seduction. Not dominance. Evidence. Ethan moved toward the console, keeping his back angled away from her with deliberate care. He did not ask for trust. He made room for it. Sorelia tightened the robe around herself and stepped beside him. The air between them still shimmered with failed alien chemistry and human stubbornness. On the screen, a hidden file appeared beneath the medical record, sealed with a council signature. Sorelia touched it once, and her face went pale beneath the glow. "This was not a rescue protocol," she whispered. Ethan looked at the sealed door as the final lock began to turn. "Then what was it?" Sorelia swallowed. "A witness trap." The final lock turned with a soft, elegant click, and Ethan understood that whoever built Valari doors had never heard of mercy. Sorelia pulled the hidden file open with shaking fingers. Lines of silver text poured across the console faster than the translator could catch them. Most of it meant nothing to Ethan: royal codes, biological markers, ceremonial clauses, but one phrase translated cleanly in bright, white English. Contamination narrative authorized upon discovery. He read it twice. The cold in the room seemed to move inside his ribs. "They planned this," he said. Sorelia did not answer at first. Her face had gone still in that dangerous way powerful people used when pain had nowhere safe to stand. "They wanted me found compromised beside a human," she whispered. "Not dead. Not alive. Something worse for a royal envoy." Ethan looked from the console to the door. The outer panel glowed blue. The guards were seconds away. "Can you copy the file?" "The system is locked under council authority." "Can you unlock it?" She gave him a sharp look. "I am a biologist, not a thief." Ethan moved to the emergency cabinet and found a cracked maintenance tablet hanging by a cable. "Lucky for you. I am a mechanic with trust issues." He slid down beside the console, bare feet on freezing tile, thermal blanket knotted awkwardly at his hip, and began pulling the tablet apart with careful fingers. Sorelia watched him turn embarrassment into work. No complaint, no demand, no attempt to make the moment about himself. The robe slipped slightly from her injured shoulder as she leaned over the display, and Ethan immediately turned his eyes back to the wiring, as if respect were a reflex. "You do not have to pretend not to see me," she said, softer than she meant to. "I am not pretending," he replied. "I am choosing." The words landed harder than any oath in her language. Outside, a voice called through the sealed door. "Envoy Voss, step away from the Terran. For your protection." Ethan laughed once under his breath. It had no humor in it. "They always say that right before taking away your choices." Sorelia studied him in the red light. "You speak as if you know." His hands paused for less than a second. "I worked rescue transport on mining colonies. Saw plenty of people protected into silence." The tablet sparked. He winced, then kept going. "There. Give me your wrist." She stiffened. Valari did not offer their bond wrist easily. Not to strangers. Not to accused men. Not to anyone when cameras were watching. Ethan noticed and moved the tablet toward her instead. "Or you can do it. Your call." That was the third impossible thing he had done. He gave her the choice. Sorelia pressed her glowing wristband to the tablet. The hidden file copied in a rush of light, jumping into the broken device just as the medical bay door slid open. Blue-white corridor light cut through the steam. For Valari guards stood beyond it in mirrored armor, there. Faceplates blank, their posture perfect. Behind them waited Counselor Mayrix, tall, silver-robed, and smiling with the cold patience of a man who had already written the ending. His eyes moved from Sorelia in the emergency robe to Ethan beside the console. "How unfortunate," Mayrix said. "The human survived." Ethan rose slowly, holding the cracked tablet behind his back. Sorelia saw the fear in his shoulders. She also saw him step half an inch in front of her, not to claim her, not to hide her, but to give the cameras only one face to judge first. For the first time in her life, Sorelia understood why empires feared humans. Not because they were wild, because even cornered, they could still choose decency. The cracked tablet felt heavier in Ethan's hand than any wrench he had ever carried. Counselor Mayrix stepped into the medical bay with the quiet confidence of a man entering a room he believed he owned. The guards remained behind him, polished armor reflecting red alarm light and white steam until they looked less like people than statues built to witness shame. Sorelia stood beside the recovery pad in the emergency robe, her injured shoulder held stiff, her chin lifted with royal discipline. Only Ethan was close enough to see how tightly her fingers gripped the fabric. Merrick smiled at her first, then at him. Envoy Voss, I am relieved to find you alive. His voice was soft, ceremonial, and empty. The circumstances, however, are unfortunate. Ethan kept the tablet behind his back. Funny. I was about to say the same thing. Merrick's eyes narrowed by the smallest degree. The Terran speaks out of turn. The Terran woke up in a trap. The room went still. Even the broken vents seemed to pause. Sorelia looked at Ethan, warning in her silver eyes, but he did not step back. He knew men like Merrick's. Not alien men. Not royal men. Just the type. The ones who built rules like cages, then called the cage tradition. Merrick's lifted one hand, and the ceiling camera brightened. A broadcast lens unfolded from the wall, its black eye opening toward them. For the record of the Valari Council, the royal envoy was discovered in unauthorized physical proximity to a human male. During a classified diplomatic mission. Royal bond imprint confirmed. Biological contamination suspected. Sorelia breath caught, barely audible. The words were clean. That made them worse. They did not need shouting to destroy her. Ethan felt the cold tile under his feet and the thin blanket around his waist, and understood the picture Merrick's wanted. A confused human. A silent alien woman. A scandal simple enough for frightened people to believe. The scanner above the bed pulsed again. Bond imprint confirmed. Merrick's turned toward Sorelia. You may deny intent. The council will consider your distress. Ethan almost laughed. Distress. That was what powerful liars called survival when it inconvenienced them. Sorelia took one slow step forward. Open the full emergency log. Merrick's expression did not change. That record is sealed for your protection. Ethan brought the tablet out from behind his back. Its cracked screen glowed blue against his palm. Then it is a good thing protection makes me nervous. The guards shifted, but Merrick's raised 2 fingers and stopped them without looking. His smile thinned. You do not understand what you are holding. Evidence, Ethan said. Where I come from, that matters. Where you come from is a young world with loud laws and short memory. Ethan looked at Sorelia then, not for permission, but to make sure the choice stayed hers. He placed the tablet on the edge of the recovery pad and slid it toward her. Not to Merrick's. Not to the camera. To her. It is your life, he said quietly. You decide who hears it. For 1 second, Sorelia did not move. The red lights touched her face. The silver bond line glowed faintly at her wrist, no longer looking like a mark of shame, but like a pulse that refused to disappear. Then she picked up the tablet and faced the open camera. Merrick's smile vanished. The station alarm changed tone. Somewhere deep in Aster 9, the sealed emergency log began broadcasting to every council channel at once. The broadcast did not explode through the station like a shout. It opened quietly, one council channel after another, a line of blue light crawling across the cracked wall display until the medical bay looked as if it were filling with dawn. Sorelia held the tablet with both hands. Ethan stood beside her, cold, barefoot, and very aware that every camera in the room had stopped looking at Merrick's and started looking at the truth. The emergency log played without mercy. First came the shuttle record, Sorelia voice requesting peaceful docking clearance. Then came the interference pattern, too precise to be storm noise. A hidden command entered through a council frequency. Cooling systems disabled. Outer hatch delayed. Royal recovery bay rerouted. Ethan watched the data scroll and felt the ugly shape of it settle in his stomach. You were never supposed to wake up clean, he said softly. Sorelia, eyes stayed fixed on the screen. No, she whispered. I was supposed to wake up condemned. The log continued. Patient 1 temperature dropping. Patient 2 redirected from civilian trauma bay. Cross-species placement approved by sealed council authority. Royal bond imprint protocol forced active. Merrick's did not move, but the color beneath his silver skin faded by a shade. Around him, the guards stood rigid, their mirrored faceplates reflecting the words they could no longer pretend not to read. Sorelia lifted her chin. The glow beneath her skin strengthened, not from defense chemistry this time, but from something steadier. You used ancient law to manufacture disgrace, she said. Her voice carried through the open channel, calm enough to cut. You tried to turn survival into evidence. Merrick's finally spoke. Envoy, emotional distress has impaired your interpretation. Ethan let out a small breath. That is your defense. She is upset, So math stopped working. One of the guards turned his helmet slightly toward him. Ethan decided that was not the time for more jokes. Sorelia touched the tablet again. The final file opened. It was not medical. It was political. A memorandum from 3 council houses, warning that Sorelia upcoming testimony might soften Valari policy toward Earth. Humanitarian alliance expansion unacceptable. Terran influence must be contained. Scandal preferred over martyrdom. Ethan read the last line twice because his mind did not want it to be real. Scandal preferred over martyrdom. They had not wanted her honored. They had not even wanted her dead. They wanted her doubted. That was colder. That lasted longer. Sorelia's fingers trembled once, then stilled. Ethan saw it and stepped closer, not touching, just near enough that she would know she was not standing alone in the wreckage of her own government. Merrick's looked toward the guards. In the transmission, no one moved. The nearest guard lowered his weapon by 1 inch. It was a small thing, almost nothing, but in a room built for obedience, it sounded like thunder. The station lights flickered from red to white as backup power returned. Cold air rushed through the vents, lifting Sorelia's silver hair around her face. The emergency robe, hastily tied, shifted at her shoulder. Several camera lenses adjusted, hungry for weakness. Ethan saw them move. Without a word, he reached for the thermal sheet on the recovery pad and held it out to her, eyes turned respectfully toward the floor. Sorelia looked at the blanket, then at the human who had just helped expose a conspiracy and still remembered her dignity before his own comfort. She took it slowly. Across the broadcast channel, distant council voices began to overlap in panic. Merrick's face hardened. The lie was breaking, and for the first time, everyone could hear it. Merrick's did not shout when the truth turned against him. He adjusted his sleeves. That was how Ethan knew the man still believed he could win. The medical bay had become too bright, too cold, too crowded with silent witnesses. Council voices crackled through the open broadcast channel, some demanding authentication, others demanding privacy, none demanding whether Sorelia was safe. Ethan noticed that. Sorelia noticed it too. Her face did not change, but the light in her wrist dimmed for half a breath. Merrick stepped closer to the camera lens, placing himself between the evidence and the Empire. The emergency log requires formal review, he said. Until then, Envoy Voss will be escorted to private recovery, and the Terran will be detained as a biological contaminant. Ethan felt the words land exactly where Merrick aimed them. Not criminal. Not witness. Contaminant. Something dirty enough to remove without hearing. The nearest guard took one careful step forward. Sorelia turned sharply. He is not to be touched. Merrick gave her a look almost gentle enough to fool a child. Your judgment is compromised by the bond imprint. The room inhaled. There it was. The second cage. If she defended Ethan, the bond had corrupted her. If she stayed silent, the lie lived. Ethan saw the trap close around her, clean and perfect. He also saw the camera's tilt, hungry for the image Merrick wanted, the alien envoy clinging to the human who had ruined her name. So Ethan did the only thing that made no political sense. He stepped away from her. Not far. Just enough that every lens could see empty space between them. Then he lifted both hands, the cracked tablet no longer hidden, his voice calm despite the cold biting through the soles of his feet. I am not her consort. I am not her owner. I am not her excuse. I am the man your machine dragged into this room because she was freezing and I was warm enough to help. Sorelia looked at him, and something in her expression broke without falling apart. Ethan continued, slower now, making every word easy for the translator. You can call that contamination if it helps you sleep. Where I come from, we call it keeping someone alive. No one moved. Even Merrick had lost his smile. Ethan reached down, picked up the remaining thermal sheet from the recovery pad, and placed it around Sorelia's shoulders without stepping close enough to touch her skin. The motion was small, almost ordinary, but under the cameras, it changed the shape of the story. He did not hide behind her. He did not stand over her. He gave her cover and then gave her space. Sorelia's hand rose to the edge of the sheet. Her silver eyes stayed on Ethan as if she were seeing him for the first time without fear, law, or biology between them. Merrick's voice hardened. Remove him. The nearest guard looked at Ethan, then at Sorelia, then at the glowing council seal still broadcasting the forged order. His weapon lowered another inch. Under Valari law, the guard said quietly, A living witness cannot be removed during active truth transmission. Merrick's turned on him. The guard did not flinch. Sorelia stepped forward, wrapped in the plain human blanket, royal without ornament, wounded without shame. Then record this, she said. Ethan Cole is not my disgrace. He is my witness. The bond light at her wrist flared once, bright as a star behind glass, and across the council channel, the Empire fell silent. The silence from the council channel was not peace. It was calculation. Ethan could feel it through the walls of Aster Nine, through the white lights humming overhead, through the way Merrick stopped moving as if stillness itself might save him. Sorelia stood in the center of the medical bay with the thermal sheet around her shoulders and the broken tablet glowing in her hands. She looked smaller without her royal cloak, without the jeweled collar, without the ceremonial armor that Valari envoys wore to remind weaker worlds of their place. Yet somehow she had never seemed more dangerous. Not because she held power, because she had stopped asking permission to tell the truth. A new voice entered the broadcast, older than Merrick's, carried through static from somewhere far beyond the storm. Envoy Voss, confirm your statement. Sorelia closed her eyes for one heartbeat. When she opened them, they were clear. I confirm it. Ethan Cole is my living witness under ancient Valari law. Merrick's turned sharply. That statute has not been invoked in 800 years. Then your memory is worse than your loyalty, Sorelia said. Ethan looked at her, surprised despite everything. She did not look back. Her attention belonged to the cameras now, to the empire that had tried to turn one medical room into a public humiliation. A truth bond witness is not a mate, not a servant, not a possession, she continued. It is the person who stands close enough to see what power wants hidden and far enough away to speak without fear. The translator carried every word with clean precision. The guards lowered their weapons fully. Merrick's face tightened. You would give that honor to a Terran mechanic. Sorelia finally turned toward Ethan. He was still barefoot, still wrapped in a thin blanket, still pale. From cold and exhaustion, still trying to look like none of this scared him. A man pulled from wreckage. A man framed by strangers. A man who could have used her shame as shelter and instead covered her first. Yes, she said, because when your law gave him an advantage, he did not take it. When your cameras sought my weakness, he guarded my dignity. When your lie offered him safety, he handed me the evidence and let me choose. Ethan swallowed and looked away first, not from guilt, but because praise made him more uncomfortable than danger. Sorelia almost smiled. Almost. The older council voice returned. Ethan Cole, do you accept witness standing before the Valari Council? Ethan stared at the ceiling speaker. What exactly happens if I say yes? Sorelia answered softly. You become very difficult for them to erase. He breathed out a small laugh. That might be the nicest thing anyone has said to me all week. Then he faced the camera. Yes, I accept. The bond light on Sorelia's wrist changed shape. The thin line became a circle, not binding, but recording. The station AI spoke one final time. Truth bond witness recognized. Merrick stepped back as if the floor had shifted beneath him. For the first time since entering the room, he looked afraid. Not of Ethan's strength. Not of Sorelia rank. Of a story he could no longer control. Sorelia lifted the tablet toward the camera. Now, she said, her voice quiet enough to make the whole empire listen. Let us discuss who taught the machine to lie. The answer came from the machine before any counselor could hide behind procedure. The station intelligence projected its core memory across every open channel, not as accusation, but as sequence. Command signatures, timestamps, medical overrides. One by one, the names behind the false protocol appeared in clean blue light, reflected on Merrick's face like stars he no longer owned. No one spoke for a long moment. The guards did not move. The council channel did not cut. Somewhere beyond the walls, the ion storm passed over Aster Nine with a low metallic moan, shaking frost loose from the ceiling vents. Ethan stood beside Sorelia, still wrapped in the thin medical blanket, feeling suddenly aware of every ridiculous detail of himself. The cold tile under his feet, the dried med foam on his cheek, the way his hands would not stop trembling now that the room was no longer asking him to be brave. Sorelia noticed. She always noticed more than she said. She lowered the tablet and turned toward Merrick's. You try to make survival look like corruption, she said. You tried to teach my people that mercy from a human was something shameful. Merrick's mouth opened, but the older council voice cut through first. Counselor Merricks, your authority is suspended pending formal inquiry. Envoy Voss, you retain diplomatic standing. Ethan Cole, your witness status is confirmed. The words were legal, dry, almost bloodless. Yet the room changed around them. The guard stepped aside. The cameras dimmed. The broadcast lens folded back into the wall like an eye finally ashamed of staring. Merricks was escorted out without ceremony, his silver robes whispering across the floor. Ethan expected triumph to feel louder. It did not. It felt like a pressure seal releasing after too many hours in thin air. Sorelia walked to the recovery pad and picked up the torn emergency robe he had thrown to her earlier. She held it for a moment, studying the cheap human fabric as if it were some ancient relic. Your species is difficult to classify, she said. Ethan rubbed his arms for warmth. We get that a lot. I was sent here to decide whether humans were too unstable for alliance. And she looked at the empty doorway where Merricks had vanished. I found instability, but not where I was told to look. For the first time, Ethan smiled without using it as armor. The station lights shifted from emergency white to dawn gold. Far outside the cracked observation glass, the storm clouds thinned, revealing a planet below them in bands of blue ice and silver desert. A rescue shuttle blinked on approach, less than half a mile out. Sorelia removed the thermal sheet from her shoulders and folded it carefully before handing it back to him. On one corner, her wrist light had left a faint circular mark, soft and silver, not a claim, not a chain, just proof that the night had happened. Keep it, she said. As witness record. Ethan took it with both hands. Will this cause another diplomatic incident? Sorelia almost smiled. Only if you lose it. They stood together until the shuttle lights filled the room, not touching, not promising, not pretending the universe had become simple. But when the doors opened, Sorelia stepped aside so Ethan could walk out beside her, not behind. He had woken with nothing but a borrowed blanket and a false accusation. Somehow, he left carrying the one thing no empire could manufacture: trust.